Hello, story lovers. Tonight, we're diving into a tale of passion, secrets, and choices that could change everything. Hearts will be broken, love will be tested, and every twist will leave you on the edge of your seat. Comment below where you're watching from, and if this story moves you, hit like, subscribe, share it with someone who loves a powerful love story, and tap the bell so you never miss the next thrilling chapter. Ready? Let's begin. The crystal chandelier cast fractured light across Emma Chen's trembling hands as she smoothed her emerald silk dress one final time. Her Manhattan apartment felt like a prison cell, all gleaming surfaces and sharp edges that reflected her anxiety back at her from every angle. The scent of her expensive perfume couldn't mask the cold sweat gathering at the base of her neck. 29 years old and clawing her way up the ladder at Pinnacle Advertising, tonight would make or break her career. The Hartwell Foundation Gala wasn't just another corporate event. It was her audition for partnership, her chance to prove she belonged among the elite who shaped New York's skyline with their billion-dollar campaigns. Her phone buzzed against the marble countertop. Richard Hampton's message glowed on the screen, "Remember, Emma. Hartwell expects to see you with appropriate company. Don't disappoint." Emma's stomach twisted. Appropriate company. Code for a charming man who would make her look successful, desirable, worthy of the boys' club she'd been fighting to enter for years. The problem was simple: her dating life had died under the crushing weight of 18-hour workdays and endless client demands. Which led to her current predicament. 3 days ago, in a moment of desperation that still made her skin crawl, she'd contacted Elite Companions, a discreet agency that provided sophisticated escorts for high-profile events. The consultation had been clinical, professional. She'd requested someone educated, articulate, capable of discussing business and current events without making her look like a fraud. The doorbell chimed at precisely 7 o'clock. Emma opened the door and her carefully constructed world tilted off its axis. The man standing in her hallway wasn't the polished pretty boy she'd expected. He was tall and commanding, with dark hair that caught the light and piercing gray eyes that seemed to see straight through her professional mask. His black tuxedo fit him like it had been crafted for his body alone. "You must be Emma." His voice held the kind of authority she associated with boardroom kings, not hired companions. "I apologize for the change in plans. Michael had a family emergency." "I'm David." Emma's mouth went dry. "But I specifically requested Michael. I don't know anything about you." David stepped closer, and she caught the scent of his cologne, expensive and subtle. "Mrs. Patterson briefed me thoroughly. I promise you'll find me more than capable." There was something magnetic about his confidence that made her protests die in her throat. She found herself studying his face, noting the sharp jawline and the way his eyes held secrets she desperately wanted to uncover. "Come in," she said finally, stepping aside. "We need to establish our story." David entered her apartment, his gaze taking in the modern furnishings and carefully curated art pieces. "Impressive space. You have excellent taste." Emma felt an unexpected flush of pleasure at his approval. "Thank you. Now, about tonight. We've been dating for 3 months. We met at a bookstore in Soho. You work in consulting." He nodded thoughtfully. "What kind of books were you buying when we met?" The question caught her off guard. Most people would simply memorize the basic facts, but David seemed genuinely interested in creating authentic details. "Business strategy books. I was researching expansion techniques for international markets." "I was browsing the philosophy section," he added smoothly. "Specifically looking for works by Marcus Aurelius." We struck up a conversation about the practical applications of Stoic philosophy in modern business. Emma stared at him in surprise. That level of detail suggested either exceptional professionalism or something else entirely. "You've actually read Marcus Aurelius?" "Meditations changed my perspective on leadership and decision-making," he replied, then smiled. "But we should probably save the philosophical discussions for the car. We don't want to be late." In the elevator down to the lobby, Emma found herself stealing glances at David. When he placed his hand gently on the small of her back to guide her toward the waiting car, the touch sent an unexpected shiver through her. "Nervous?" he asked as they settled into the back seat. "Always before big events. This gala could determine my entire career trajectory." David turned to face her fully. "Tell me about it. What makes this evening so crucial?" Emma found herself opening up about her ambitions, her struggles in a male-dominated industry, the constant pressure to prove herself. David listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated he understood the complexities of corporate politics better than most people in her actual profession. "You know," he said as they neared the venue, "success often comes from being authentically yourself rather than trying to be what others expect." "Easy to say when you're not fighting for recognition every day," Emma replied. David's expression grew thoughtful. "Sometimes the fight changes us in ways we don't anticipate. The question is whether we like who we become in the process." The Mandarin Oriental's ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and elegant floral arrangements. New York's elite mingled in their finest attire, the air buzzing with conversations about business deals and charitable causes. Emma felt David's presence beside her like a shield against the judgmental stares and whispered speculations that usually followed her at these events. "Emma, darling." Richard Hampton approached with his wife, both eyeing David with obvious curiosity. "You look stunning tonight." "Thank you, Richard. I'd like you to meet David." David extended his hand with perfect composure. "Richard, pleasure to meet you. Emma speaks of you often. She's incredibly passionate about the Hartwell Foundation project." Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. "Oh, you're familiar with our work. Environmental sustainability marketing fascinates me. The challenge of making conservation profitable requires innovative thinking." Emma watched in amazement as David engaged Richard in a sophisticated discussion about market trends and consumer behavior. He spoke with the kind of insight that typically came from years of high-level business experience. As the evening progressed, Emma found herself genuinely enjoying David's company. He navigated social interactions effortlessly, remembering names and personal details with remarkable skill. When she introduced him to potential clients, he asked intelligent questions that actually advanced her business interests. During dinner, David shared thoughtful perspectives on philanthropy and social responsibility that impressed the foundation board members seated at their table. Emma caught herself staring at him, wondering who he really was beneath the polished exterior. "Your boyfriend is quite remarkable," whispered Catherine Hartwell, the foundation's president. "Such depth and intelligence. You're very lucky." Emma smiled and nodded, but inside she felt increasingly confused. David's knowledge and sophistication seemed far beyond what she'd expect from someone in his supposed profession. When the orchestra began playing, David extended his hand to Emma. "May I have this dance?" Held close in his arms on the dance floor, Emma felt a connection she hadn't experienced in years. David moved with natural grace, leading her through the steps with gentle confidence. The scent of his cologne made her feel slightly dizzy. "You're full of surprises," she murmured as they swayed to the music. "Good surprises, I hope," he replied, his breath warm against her ear. Emma looked up into his gray eyes and saw something that made her heart skip. The way he was looking at her didn't feel like a professional performance. There was genuine warmth there, perhaps even desire. "Very good surprises," she admitted softly. As the song ended, David's hand lingered on her waist. For a moment, they stood motionless in the middle of the dance floor, surrounded by other couples but feeling completely alone together. The magical moment was interrupted by Emma's assistant, Jennifer, approaching with obvious excitement. "Emma, you'll never believe this. James Alexander from Technova Industries just arrived. He never comes to these events." Emma felt David stiffen beside her. She glanced at him curiously. But his expression had become carefully neutral. "Who's James Alexander?" David asked casually. "One of the youngest billionaire CEOs in the city," Jennifer gushed. He's incredibly private, never gives interviews, barely appears in public. Some people call him the ghost of Silicon Valley. Emma noticed David's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Something cold settled in her stomach as she watched his reaction. "Sounds like an interesting man," he said, his voice perfectly controlled. But Emma had spent years reading people in boardrooms and negotiations. She knew when someone was lying. And David was definitely hiding something. Emma woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom windows and the unfamiliar scent of coffee brewing in her kitchen. For a moment, she lay still, remembering the previous night with a mixture of wonder and confusion. David had stayed until nearly 3 in the morning, talking about everything from literature to business philosophy, but he'd remained a perfect gentleman despite the obvious chemistry crackling between them. She found him in her kitchen, fully dressed in his tuxedo pants and white shirt, sleeves rolled up as he prepared breakfast. The domestic scene felt surprisingly natural, as if he belonged there. "Good morning," she said, wrapping her silk robe tighter around herself. David turned, offering her a cup of coffee with a smile that made her stomach flutter. "I hope you don't mind. I'm an early riser, and I thought you might need caffeine after last night." Emma accepted the coffee, inhaling the rich aroma. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to." He paused, studying her face. "Last night was extraordinary, Emma. You were extraordinary." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten. "David, about your fee. Don't." His voice turned sharp, almost harsh. "Don't reduce what happened between us to a transaction." Emma stared at him, thrown off balance by the intensity of his reaction. But that's what this was supposed to be. A business arrangement. David set down his coffee cup with deliberate precision. "Was it? Because what I felt last night had nothing to do with business." The air between them crackled with tension. Emma found herself drowning in his gray eyes, seeing something there that looked dangerously like genuine emotion. "I need to know who you really are," she whispered. David's expression shuttered closed. "I'm exactly who I said I am." "No, you're not." Emma moved closer, her instincts as sharp as they were in any corporate negotiation. "The way you handled Richard Hampton, your knowledge of market trends, the authority in your voice when you took that phone call. You're not a consultant, and you're definitely not an escort." For a moment, David looked like he might tell her the truth. Then his phone rang, shattering the moment. He glanced at the screen and his face went stone cold. "I have to take this." He stepped onto her balcony, but Emma could see the tension in his shoulders. As he spoke in urgent, clipped tones. When he returned, all traces of warmth had vanished from his expression. "I need to go." "David, wait." He kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it made her heart ache. "Thank you for last night, Emma. For everything." And then he was gone, leaving Emma standing in her kitchen with more questions than answers and the lingering scent of his cologne. 2 weeks passed without contact. Emma threw herself into her work, using the connections she'd made at the gala to secure 3 new accounts. Richard Hampton had been so impressed that partnership discussions were already underway. Everything she'd worked for was finally within reach. So why did she feel so empty? She was reviewing campaign proposals in her corner office when Jennifer burst through the door, practically vibrating with excitement. "Emma, you have to see this." She thrust a tablet into Emma's hands. The Business Journal just published their annual list of New York's most eligible bachelors. Emma glanced at the screen and her blood turned to ice. Staring back at her was a professional headshot of David, but the name underneath read, James Alexander, CEO of Technova Industries. "Isn't he gorgeous?" Jennifer gushed. "They say he's worth over $3 billion. Can you imagine? He's so mysterious though. There are hardly any personal photos of him anywhere." Emma's hands trembled as she scrolled through the article. Every detail matched, the piercing gray eyes, the sharp jawline, the aura of quiet authority that had made her pulse race from the moment she'd opened her door. "Emma? Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." The ghost of Silicon Valley. That's what Jennifer had called him at the gala. And Emma had been too caught up in the fantasy to see what was right in front of her. She'd hired an escort and gotten a billionaire CEO instead. The question was, why? That evening, Emma stood outside the gleaming tower that housed Technova Industries, her heart hammering against her ribs. Security was tight, but she'd managed to talk her way up to the executive floor by claiming she had a meeting about a potential marketing campaign. The receptionist's smile was polite but confused. "I'm sorry, Ms. Chen, but I don't have any record of an appointment with Mr. Alexander. He rarely takes meetings with outside agencies without prior arrangement through our marketing department. Could you at least tell him Emma Chen is here? I think he'll want to see me." Minutes stretched like hours. Emma paced the elegant waiting area, her mind racing through every moment she'd shared with David. Had any of it been real? Or was she just another conquest for a bored billionaire playing games? "Ms. Chen." Emma turned to see a tall, impeccably dressed woman approaching. Everything about her screamed wealth and power, from her Hermes handbag to her perfectly styled blonde hair. "I'm Victoria Ashford, Mr. Alexander's attorney. He asked me to speak with you." Emma's stomach dropped. "He won't see me himself." Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. "Mr. Alexander values his privacy. He wanted me to make sure you understand the importance of discretion regarding your recent interaction." The words hit Emma like physical blows. "Interaction? Is that what you're calling it?" "A non-disclosure agreement has been prepared." Victoria produced an elegant folder from her briefcase. "The terms are quite generous. $100,000 in exchange for your complete silence about any contact you may have had with Mr. Alexander." Emma stared at the folder like it was a venomous snake. "You're trying to pay me off. We're offering compensation for your discretion. Mr. Alexander's reputation is vital to his business interests." The clinical coldness in Victoria's voice made Emma's vision blur with rage. "And what about my reputation? What about the fact that he lied to me?" Victoria's expression didn't change. "I'm sure you can understand Mr. Alexander's need for privacy in his personal affairs. A man in his position attracts a great deal of unwanted attention." Unwanted attention. Like she was some kind of stalker instead of a woman who'd opened her heart to someone she thought she could trust. "Tell your client," Emma said, her voice steady despite the fury burning in her chest, "that he can keep his money. And tell him that if he ever comes near me again, I'll make sure the whole world knows exactly what kind of man James Alexander really is." She turned and walked toward the elevator, her head held high even as her heart shattered into pieces. She'd fallen for a lie, a carefully constructed fantasy designed to amuse a man who could buy and sell her entire life without blinking. But as the elevator doors closed, Emma caught a glimpse of movement in the shadows beyond Victoria's shoulder. For just a moment, she could have sworn she saw a familiar figure watching from the darkened hallway. Gray eyes filled with something that might have been regret. Or maybe that was just another lie too. Emma's apartment felt like a mausoleum. 3 days had passed since her confrontation with Victoria Ashford, and she'd barely left her bedroom. The partnership papers Richard had couriered over sat untouched on her kitchen counter, the culmination of everything she'd worked for reduced to meaningless ink on paper. She'd achieved her dream and lost herself in the process. The knock on her door at 10 p.m. was soft but insistent. Emma wrapped her bathrobe tighter and peered through the peephole, her heart stopping at the familiar silhouette in the hallway. David stood there, still achingly handsome but different somehow. The confident mask he'd worn at the gala was gone, replaced by something raw and vulnerable that made her chest ache despite her anger. "Go away," she called through the door. "Emma, please. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. You sent your lawyer to pay me off. I think we're done talking." "I never sent Victoria." His voice was rough, desperate. I didn't know about the NDA until after she'd already left. When I found out, I fired her on the spot. Emma pressed her forehead against the cool wood of the door. Part of her wanted to believe him, but she'd learned the hard way that wanting something didn't make it true. It doesn't matter. You still lied to me about who you are. You're right. I did lie. And if you'll let me in, I'll tell you why. Against her better judgment, Emma opened the door. David looked like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled. There was something broken in his eyes that made her anger waver. You have 5 minutes, she said, stepping aside. David entered slowly, as if he was afraid she might bolt. My real name is James Alexander. I'm 32 years old, and I've been running Technova since I was 25. Everything else you know about my professional life is public record. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Emma crossed her arms, trying to hold on to her fury. Why were you at Elite Companions? Why did you pretend to be an escort? David's laugh was bitter. Because I was investigating them. Emma blinked, thrown off balance. What? 6 months ago, my younger sister Sarah started working for Elite Companions. She was 24, fresh out of Columbia with a master's degree in art history, and drowning in student loans. The agency promised her easy money for attending cultural events with wealthy clients. David's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Within 2 months, she was dead. Overdose, they said. But Sarah never touched drugs. She barely drank wine at dinner. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. Oh God. The police investigation was a joke. Elite Companions had lawyers, connections, money to make problems disappear. But I had more money, and I had rage. David's voice turned deadly quiet. I spent 3 months infiltrating their operation. Learning their client list, documenting their practices, gathering evidence. And I was just another client to investigate. David's eyes met hers, and she saw the truth there before he spoke. You were supposed to be. I was scheduled to work with a different client that night, someone we suspected was involved in Sarah's death. But when Michael called in his emergency and Mrs. Patterson asked me to take his appointment with you, I saw an opportunity. Emma's stomach churned. An opportunity for what? To get close to someone who might have information about their high-profile client base. Your boss Richard Hampton was one of their regular customers. David ran a hand through his hair. But from the moment you opened your door, everything changed. Changed how? David stepped closer, and Emma caught that familiar scent of his cologne. You weren't what I expected. You were brilliant and driven and beautiful, but more than that, you were real. Authentic. In a world full of people trying to use me or manipulate me, you were just, yourself. Despite herself, Emma felt tears pricking her eyes. So you decided to manipulate me instead? No. David's voice cracked. I decided to forget why I was really there. For one night, I wanted to be David the consultant instead of James Alexander the billionaire CEO. I wanted to be someone who could make you smile without you wondering what I wanted from you. Emma stared at him, seeing the pain carved into every line of his face. Your sister's death wasn't an accident, was it? Sarah was going to expose Elite Companions. She discovered they were more than just an escort service. Some of their clients were paying for things that went way beyond companionship. When she threatened to go to the authorities, they silenced her. And now? David's smile was sharp and cold. Now I have enough evidence to destroy them. The FBI will be making arrests within the week. Elite Companions will cease to exist, and everyone who hurt my sister will pay. Emma felt like the world was shifting beneath her feet. Everything she thought she knew was wrong. David wasn't some bored billionaire playing games. He was a man consumed by grief and rage, using his resources to seek justice for his murdered sister. Why didn't you tell me the truth that night? After we connected? Because I'm falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between them like a confession and a plea. And men in my position don't get to fall in love with people who work in the same world that killed my sister. Emma's breath caught. David. James, he corrected softly. My real name is James. James. The name felt strange on her tongue. This whole thing, your investigation, it's dangerous, isn't it? His silence was answer enough. Emma closed her eyes, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on her. When she opened them, David was watching her with desperate hope. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, he said quietly. I know I've put you in danger just by being near you. But Emma, what we had that night, what I felt with you, that was the most real thing that's happened to me in years. Before Emma could respond, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and frowned. It's Jennifer. She never calls this late. Emma? Jennifer's voice was shaky, frightened. Something terrible has happened. Richard Hampton is dead. The phone slipped from Emma's nerveless fingers. David caught it, his face going pale as he listened to Jennifer's panicked explanation. When? He asked tersely. They found him this morning. The police are calling it a suicide, but Emma, there's more. They found evidence in his office. Financial records, communications. He was being investigated for embezzlement and money laundering. David met Emma's horrified gaze. They both knew Richard's death was no suicide. Jennifer, listen to me carefully, David said into the phone. Emma can't come to the office right now. Tell anyone who asks that she's taking a few days of personal leave. Who is this? Someone who's trying to keep her alive. David ended the call and pulled Emma into his arms as her legs gave out. They know, he whispered against her hair. They know I've been investigating them, and now they're cleaning house. Emma pulled back to look at him, seeing her own fear reflected in his gray eyes. What do we do? We disappear. Tonight. I have a safe house upstate where we can. The apartment lights went out. In the sudden darkness, Emma heard David's sharp intake of breath. Then his hand was on her arm, pulling her toward the back of the apartment. The fire escape, he whispered urgently. Move. As they crept through the darkened apartment, Emma heard the unmistakable sound of her front door opening. Professional. Quiet. Deadly. They weren't alone anymore. The cabin in the Adirondacks was a fortress disguised as rustic charm. Hidden security cameras, reinforced windows, and enough emergency supplies to last a month. Emma had spent the past week learning just how deep James Alexander's paranoia ran, and how justified it was. They killed 3 more people, James said, ending his encrypted call with the FBI. His face was haggard, stubble covering his jaw. My contact inside Elite Companions, a prosecutor who was building a case, and a journalist who was asking too many questions. Emma looked up from the files scattered across the dining table. For days, she'd been helping James piece together the web of corruption that had consumed her world. Richard Hampton had been just the tip of the iceberg. Elite Companions was a front for something much darker: human trafficking, money laundering, and murder disguised as accidents and suicides. The FBI is moving too slowly, James continued, pacing like a caged animal. Every day we wait, more people die. What are you thinking? Emma asked, though she already knew from the dangerous glint in his eyes. I'm thinking it's time to stop being reactive. We have enough evidence to destroy them, but we need to get it to someone who can act on it immediately. Emma stood slowly. James, you're talking about walking into a trap. They want you dead. The moment you surface, the moment I surface, this ends. One way or another. He turned to face her, and Emma saw the same grief-fueled determination that had started this whole nightmare. I can't let anyone else die because I was too afraid to finish what I started. And what about me? The words came out smaller than Emma intended. What happens to me when you throw your life away for revenge? James crossed to her in 3 quick strides, pulling her into his arms. This isn't revenge, Emma. It's justice. And you'll be safe. I've arranged for you to be relocated, new identity, enough money to start over anywhere you want. Emma pushed against his chest. I don't want to start over. I want to stay with you. You can't. His voice was final, absolute. The people I'm going after have resources you can't imagine. They'll use you to get to me, and I won't let that happen. So you're just going to decide my fate without consulting me? Emma's anger flared. Just like you decided to lie to me, just like you decided to drag me into this mess. James's eyes flashed. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need your protection. I need your trust. Emma stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. Do you have any idea what these past few weeks have been like for me? Finding out that everything I thought I knew about you was a lie. Learning that the career I've worked my entire life to build is connected to people who murder anyone who threatens them. Emma. I'm not finished. Her voice cracked with emotion. I've lost everything, James. My job, my apartment, my sense of safety. The only thing I have left is you, and now you want to take that away too. James's face softened, but his resolve didn't waver. It's temporary. Once this is over, you'll be dead. Emma's words hung in the air like a death sentence. Because that's what you're planning, isn't it? Some grand gesture where you sacrifice yourself to bring them down. James didn't deny it, which was answer enough. Emma turned away, staring out at the lake beyond the cabin windows. The water was dark and still, reflecting the gray sky like a mirror. There's something you need to know about me, she said quietly. What? Emma's hands trembled as she reached into her purse and pulled out a small recording device. I've been documenting everything. Every conversation, every piece of evidence, every plan you've shared with me. James went very still. What are you talking about? Emma turned to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm talking about insurance. The real reason I've been helping you isn't just because I care about you. It's because I made a deal. The color drained from James's face. What kind of deal? 3 days before we came here, I received a call. A woman who claimed to represent certain interested parties. She said if I could get close to you, document your investigation, report on your plans, my family would be safe. James stepped backward as if she'd struck him. Your family? My parents in San Francisco. My younger brother who's starting his residency at UCSF. The woman knew everything about them, James. Where they lived, where they worked, their daily routines. She made it very clear what would happen if I didn't cooperate. So all of this, James's voice was hollow, everything between us, was just you following orders. No. Emma's voice broke. Everything I felt for you was real. The connection, the chemistry, falling in love with you. But I couldn't let them hurt my family. James sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Jesus, Emma. Do you have any idea what you've done? I know exactly what I've done. I've betrayed the man I love to save the people who raised me. And I hate myself for it. The recording device lay between them on the table like a loaded gun. Emma picked it up with shaking fingers. I was supposed to deliver this to them tonight. All your plans, all your evidence, everything. She met James's eyes. But I can't do it. Not even to save my family. Emma hurled the device against the stone fireplace. It shattered into pieces, taking with it any chance of keeping her family safe. James stared at the broken fragments. They'll kill them now. You know that, right? I know. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. But I couldn't live with myself if I let them kill you too. James stood slowly, crossing to where she stood. For a moment, Emma thought he might hit her. Instead, he pulled her against his chest, holding her as she sobbed. "I'm so sorry," she whispered against his shirt. "I'm so fucking sorry." "I know." His voice was rough with emotion. "I know you are." They held each other in the fading afternoon light, two broken people clinging to the wreckage of their love. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. "We need to leave," James said finally. "They'll be coming soon." Emma pulled back to look at him. "Where will we go?" "I don't know. Somewhere far away from here. Somewhere they can't find us." "James." Emma caught his hand as he turned toward the door. "About my family. I'll take care of it." His eyes held a promise that was both comfort and threat. "The people who threaten them will pay for what they've done." Emma nodded, knowing that James's definition of payment would be final and absolute. She'd saved the man she loved, but at what cost? As they gathered their things and prepared to run again, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that their enemies were already one step ahead. The recording device was destroyed, but the damage was done. Someone had been pulling her strings from the beginning, and that someone was still out there. The phone on the kitchen counter rang once, then stopped. James and Emma froze, staring at each other in the sudden silence. Then the phone rang again. And again. And again. James reached for the phone with steady hands, though Emma could see the tension coiled in his shoulders. The caller ID showed only blocked number, but they both knew who was on the other end. "James Alexander," he said into the receiver, his voice calm and controlled. "Mr. Alexander. How nice to finally speak with you directly." The voice was cultured, refined, with just a hint of an accent Emma couldn't place. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." "And what might that be?" "Evidence. Documentation. The fruits of your rather impressive investigation into my business operations." The man's laugh was warm, almost grandfatherly. "You've caused me considerable inconvenience, Mr. Alexander." Emma moved closer, and James angled the phone so she could hear both sides of the conversation. "I assume this is Marcus Volkov?" James's voice held deadly certainty. "Very good. Yes, I am the man you've been hunting with such dedication. The man responsible for your sister's unfortunate accident." James's knuckles went white around the phone. "Sarah's murder, you mean?" Such harsh language. Sarah was a beautiful girl, but she lacked discretion. In my line of work, discretion is often the difference between life and death. Emma watched James struggle to maintain control, seeing the rage building behind his gray eyes like a storm gathering strength. "What do you want?" James asked. "A trade. Quite simple, really. All your evidence, every copy, every backup, every file you've shared with law enforcement. In exchange, I'll allow you and Ms. Chen to walk away from this alive. And if I refuse? Then I'll kill everyone you've ever cared about. Starting with MS. Chen's family in San Francisco, then moving on to your business associates, your household staff, that charming elderly couple who runs the bookstore where you buy your philosophy books." Volkov's voice remained pleasant, conversational. "I have all the time in the world, Mr. Alexander." "Do you?" Emma felt ice spreading through her veins. This man knew everything about them, had been watching them for who knew how long. "You have 1 hour, Volkov continued. "There's a warehouse at Pier 47 in Manhattan. Come alone, bring everything, and perhaps we can end this civilly." The line went dead. James stared at the phone for a long moment before setting it down. When he looked at Emma, she saw something in his eyes that terrified her more than Volkov's threats. "You're going to do it," she said. "You're going to give him what he wants." "I don't have a choice." "There's always a choice." Emma grabbed his arm. "We can run. Disappear completely. Start over somewhere he'll never find us." James shook his head. He found us here, in a safe house that doesn't officially exist. He knows about your family, about my personal habits. There's nowhere we can go that he won't follow. Then we fight. With what army? James pulled away from her, moving to the window. Volkov has been building his empire for decades. He has people in law enforcement, in government, in places I can't even imagine. The FBI agents I was working with are probably dead or bought off by now. Emma watched him standing there, silhouetted against the dying light, and realized she was seeing the exact moment when hope died in someone's eyes. So that's it? She asked quietly. We just give up. We survive. That's all we can do now. But Emma had spent her entire career reading between the lines, seeing what people didn't say as much as what they did. And what James wasn't saying was that he had no intention of walking away from that warehouse alive. James. She moved to stand behind him, placing her hands on his shoulders. Look at me. He turned reluctantly, and she saw the truth carved into every line of his face. You're planning to kill him, aren't you? Even if it means dying in the process. Emma. Don't lie to me. Not now. Not after everything we've been through. James closed his eyes. I can't let him win. I can't let Sarah's death be meaningless. And I can't let you throw your life away for revenge. It's not revenge. It's justice. It's suicide. Emma cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her gaze. And it's not what Sarah would want. You didn't know my sister. No, but I know you. And the man I fell in love with isn't a killer. He's someone who builds things, who creates jobs and opportunities and hope. Someone who dances beautifully and quotes Marcus Aurelius and makes terrible coffee but does it with such care that it tastes perfect anyway. Tears ran down James's face, the first she'd ever seen him cry. I don't know how to stop, he whispered. The rage, the need for vengeance, it's all I have left of her. No. Emma pulled him against her, holding him as tightly as she could. You have love. You have the capacity to choose forgiveness over vengeance, life over death. You have me. They stood together in the growing darkness, two damaged souls holding onto each other against the storm. There might be another way, Emma said finally. James pulled back to look at her. What do you mean? Emma walked to the table where James's laptop sat open. You said Volkov has people everywhere. But he can't have everyone. And there's one thing he doesn't know about. Which is? Emma's fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing files she'd helped James organize over the past week. Before I destroyed the recording device, I uploaded everything to a cloud server. Not just our conversations, but copies of all your evidence, all your documentation about elite companions and Volkov's operation. James stared at her in amazement. You made backups? I made a dead man's switch. Emma turned the laptop screen toward him. If I don't check in every 12 hours and enter a specific code, everything gets automatically sent to every major news outlet in the world. CNN, BBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, WikiLeaks. Everyone. Emma, that's brilliant. It's also a death sentence for both of us if Volkov finds out. Emma saved her work and closed the laptop. But it gives us leverage. We don't have to trade your evidence for our lives. We can trade Volkov's guaranteed exposure for his guaranteed silence. James shook his head. He'll never agree to that. Men like Volkov don't negotiate. They eliminate threats. Then we make sure he understands that eliminating us eliminates any chance he has of containing this. Emma pulled out her phone and dialed the number Volkov had called from. It went straight to voicemail. Mr. Volkov, this is Emma Chen. I think we need to have a conversation about the terms of our arrangement. The warehouse, 1 hour. But this time, we're all coming to the table as equals. She ended the call and looked at James. Now we see if a lifetime of corporate negotiations prepared me for this. Emma, if this goes wrong. It won't. Emma kissed him softly, tasting salt and determination. We're going to walk out of there together. We're going to expose Volkov and his organization. And then we're going to disappear somewhere warm and build a life that has nothing to do with any of this. And if we don't? Emma smiled, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. Then at least we'll go down fighting together. An hour later, they stood at the entrance to the warehouse at Pier 47. The Hudson River stretched black and endless beside them, the city lights reflecting off the water like fallen stars. Emma could smell salt air and motor oil, could hear the distant sound of traffic and boat horns. James squeezed her hand. Last chance to change your mind and run. Not a chance in hell. They walked into the warehouse together, ready to face whatever waited in the darkness. Marcus Volkov stood in the center of the vast space, a slight man in an expensive suit surrounded by shadows and armed guards. He looked exactly like what he was, a grandfather who happened to run a criminal empire worth billions of dollars. Ms. Chen. Mr. Alexander. How nice to finally meet you both properly. Emma stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Mr. Volkov. I believe we have some negotiating to do. Volkov smiled, and Emma saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. My dear girl, he said gently, I'm afraid you've misunderstood the nature of our relationship. I don't negotiate with dead people. The warehouse erupted in gunfire. Emma felt James tackle her to the ground behind a concrete pillar as bullets sparked off the floor around them. She heard shouting, running footsteps, the sharp crack of weapons firing in the enclosed space. The back exit, James shouted over the noise. Can you make it? Emma looked across the warehouse toward the rear door, calculating angles and distances while automatic weapons chattered in the darkness. Together, she said. They ran. Behind them, Emma heard Volkov screaming orders, heard the thunder of footsteps in pursuit. A bullet whined past her ear, close enough that she felt the displaced air. James pushed her ahead of him, using his body as a shield. They burst through the back door into the cold night air. The Hudson River stretched before them, dark and forbidding. Behind them, the warehouse door exploded outward as Volkov's men gave chase. The water, James said. It's our only chance. Emma looked at the black water 20 feet below, knowing it was probably freezing, knowing they might not survive the impact. On 3, she said. Emma, I love you. I love you too. They jumped together, hand in hand, into the darkness. The water hit like a physical blow, driving the air from Emma's lungs and shocking her system with cold so intense it felt like fire. She lost James's hand in the impact, lost all sense of up and down in the churning blackness. When she finally surfaced, gasping and choking, she could see the warehouse burning in the distance. Volkov's men lined the pier, scanning the water with flashlights, but the current had already carried her too far for them to spot her easily. James, she called softly, treading water and fighting the cold that was already numbing her limbs. Here. His voice came from somewhere to her left, weak but alive. Emma swam toward the sound, finding him floating near a pier piling, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. Are you hit? Just banged up. James grabbed onto the piling, pulling her against him. You. Alive. That's what counts. They clung to each other in the freezing water, watching the warehouse burn and listening to the distant sound of sirens approaching. The dead man's switch, James said through chattering teeth. How long do we have? Emma checked her waterlogged phone. Miraculously, it was still working. 8 hours until the next check-in. Think they'll find Volkov's body in that fire? Emma looked at the flames consuming the warehouse and shook her head. Men like him don't die that easily. But it doesn't matter. The world is about to learn everything about elite companions and his organization. He can run, but he can't hide from the truth. A Coast Guard boat appeared around the bend, its searchlight sweeping the water. "Over here," Emma called out, waving her free arm. As the boat approached, James pulled her closer. "So what happens now?" Emma kissed him, tasting river water and smoke and the promise of a future neither of them had expected to see. "Now we disappear. New names, new lives, somewhere far away from all of this. Together. Together." The Coast Guard pulled them from the water, wrapping them in thermal blankets and asking questions they couldn't answer. Behind them, the warehouse continued to burn, taking with it the last remnants of the world that had tried to destroy them. 6 months later, Emma sat on a beach in New Zealand, watching the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. The cottage behind her was small but perfect, surrounded by gardens she was learning to tend. James emerged from the house carrying 2 cups of coffee, his hair longer now, his face tanned and peaceful in a way she'd never seen before. "Any word from the outside world?" he asked, settling beside her on the sand. Emma folded the newspaper she'd been reading. "Volkov's trial started yesterday in New York. They're calling it the crime story of the century. And us? Officially, we died in the warehouse fire. The world moved on." James smiled, pulling her against his side. "Good. I like being dead. It's surprisingly relaxing." Emma laughed, feeling truly happy for the first time in years. David Martinez and Sarah Chen, ordinary citizens of New Zealand. "I still can't believe the fake IDs actually worked. Money opens a lot of doors. Even posthumous money." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the waves roll onto the shore. Emma thought about the woman she'd been, the corporate climber who'd measured her worth in client accounts and partnership tracks. That person felt like a stranger now. "Do you ever miss it?" James asked. "Your old life?" Emma considered the question seriously. "I miss the challenge sometimes. The satisfaction of closing a difficult deal. But not the person I was becoming. And now?" Emma smiled, leaning into his warmth. "Now I'm exactly who I want to be. With exactly who I want to be with." James kissed the top of her head. "Forever. Forever." As the sun disappeared into the ocean, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Emma felt the last of her old life slip away like smoke on the wind. They'd lost everything that had once defined them, but in losing it all, they'd found something infinitely more valuable. They'd found each other. And sometimes, Emma thought as James's hand found hers in the gathering darkness, sometimes losing everything was the only way to discover what truly mattered. The waves whispered against the shore, carrying away the last echoes of who they used to be and welcoming the people they'd chosen to become. The end.